Hello, my name is Virginia, and this is the story of my unexpected romance with Dr. Howard. At 68 years old, widowed for 9, my life moved in slow, predictable steps, like an old clock that keeps ticking even when no one pays attention. I wake up early, make myself a hot cup of coffee with milk, read the newspaper by the window, and when the sun begins to set on the porch, I sit and sew or embroider something while listening to the songs I loved from a time that no longer returns. I have a 12-year-old grandson who is my greatest joy. It's because of him that I learned to use video calls, and it's with him that I laugh those deep laughs that make your heart ache in the best way. He always tells me, "Grandma, you're the most modern of them all." And I laugh, like someone who's learned to hide a quiet emptiness that never quite leaves. The truth is, ever since my husband passed away, I never thought about love again. Not because of pain, but because of silence. A silence that whispers, "This isn't for you anymore." Life became a sequence of small rituals. Walks in the park, Saturday visits to the farmer's market, church ladies' meetings, and of course medical appointments. We age and start collecting doctors the way people used to collect records. I liked them all, but none ever interrupted my routine. They were practical, necessary appointments. I went, listened, returned. That was it. Until one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, I sat in the waiting room of the cardiology clinic. A quiet line of seniors filled the chairs, their eyes tired. And there I was, thinking about the lasagna I'd reheat later. I had no idea that this would be the last ordinary appointment of my life, but I'm getting ahead of myself. All I can say is that, up to that day, love was something I only saw in the old movies on afternoon television. It was beautiful, but distant. Something I talked about with my neighbor Mildred during porch conversations. "Ah, Mildred, if I were younger." And she'd reply, "Virginia, we only get old on the outside." I'd laugh, amused. But deep down, I know. Longer believed there was space for passion in my world. I took care of myself, of course. Wore perfume, applied lipstick, but it was more out of respect for myself than out of any hope of being noticed. Truth be told, I didn't expect anything. No butterflies, no sweaty palms, no glow in the eyes, the kind only those who've fallen in love understand. I thought my heart only beat out of obligation, and it was in that certainty that life caught me off guard. Because when we least expect it, life exhales, and what once felt like routine becomes poetry. But that, I'll share later. Before I continue, if this story has touched even a corner of your heart, take a second to subscribe and leave a like. It helps me keep telling stories that remind us. Love always finds a way. That day felt like any other. I had on the mental lab coat of routine, purse on my side, test results in hand, hair pulled back in the most practical way possible. The appointment was for 3 p.m., but I arrived early, as always. I have this habit of avoiding lateness, mine or anyone else's. I sat in the blue waiting room chair, that soft scent of rubbing alcohol in the air, and stared at the anatomy posters, hearts with colorful veins and complicated words. When the door opened and they called my name, I stood slowly, adjusted my blouse, and entered, already preparing to talk about my heartbeat, blood pressure, diet. But when my eyes met his, something unexpected happened. He stood there, smiling gently, wearing thin-rimmed glasses that gave him a scholarly air. A man of 76, with neatly combed gray hair and a presence that didn't impose. It embraced. "Good afternoon, Ms. Virginia. Please have a seat," he said in a voice as warm as a blanket on a cold day. I sat down, but inside, something had already shaken my composure. It wasn't just the way he spoke, it was the way he looked at me, really looked. He met my gaze, waited for my answers, and when I spoke, it felt like he was hearing not just what I said, but what I didn't say. "Have you been feeling well lately?" he asked, flipping through my test results. "Yes, doctor. Just the usual. A bit of tiredness here, a bit of longing there." He laughed, and I realized I had let more slip than I intended. Longing can also tighten the chest, but that won't show up on an EKG. I blushed, but smiled. There was a lightness in that room I hadn't expected. He spoke simply, but with a sweetness in his gestures. When he took my blood pressure, his hands were steady but gentle. And I, who had always been so rational during medical visits, noticed my heart racing. And it wasn't because of health. "Your heart's doing well," he said, handing me back the device. "But sometimes it beats for reasons medicine can't explain, doesn't it?" That threw me off. I went quiet for a moment, wondering if he'd picked up on something, but he just smiled again, that discreet, calm smile that disarmed me. When I left the office, I clutched my purse tighter. My legs felt wobbly, like I was 15 again, having just flirted by the school gates. But I was 68, and this wasn't expected. Waiting for the elevator, I leaned my head against the cool hallway wall and thought, it was just a checkup, so why does it feel like something inside me changed? After that first appointment, something in me remained unsettled, like I had brushed against a memory that didn't exist yet, but already left behind its longing. I went home repeating Dr. Howard's words, not the medical ones, but the ones in between the lines. Sometimes the heart beats for things even medicine can't explain. It was just a sentence, but it echoed in me like a song you can't forget. When the second appointment was scheduled, I noticed something unusual. For the first time in ages, I was excited, not because of test results or any pain, but because there was a new spark in that routine. I found myself choosing my blouse more carefully, applying a soft lipstick, the same one I used to wear at Sunday lunches with my husband years ago. I chuckled at myself, but didn't stop. The office looked the same, but something felt different. Maybe it was just me, or maybe not. The conversation slowly drifted beyond medicine. After the tests, he asked how I spent my days, and without even noticing, I told him about my grandson, how he calls me his tech-savvy grandma, about Mildred, my porch-side partner in sacred gossip. He smiled and said, I like hearing stories like that. They show that, heart's still alive, even when everything looks calm on the outside. That touched me, because it had been so long since I'd felt heard as a woman. I was a patient, a grandmother, a widow, but in that room my words mattered, not out of obligation, but because someone genuinely cared. Appointment after appointment, he asked more, and I held back less. I told him about grief, about the Saturday nights when loneliness presses harder, about birthdays where silence made more noise than any party, and he listened like someone holding rare porcelain, with care and reverence. Virginia, he once said, you have a beautiful way of talking about life, even the sad parts. You tell them like someone who's already forgiven time. I was speechless. It was a simple sentence, but it felt like someone had looked beyond my skin. For the first time in many years, I felt whole, even with my scars. I began counting the days until the next visit, and when I went, it was no longer just about health. It was for the conversation, the connection, the feeling that someone saw me, heard me, felt me. It was a slow blooming, like the first buds of spring after a long winter. And the strangest part? He never crossed any lines. He never said anything inappropriate. But it was precisely in that respect that something deep grew. And without realizing it, I let myself be touched, not by hands, but by soul. It was there, in that white room smelling of alcohol and hope, that I began to understand. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from medicine. It comes from presence, from being listened to. And that's what Dr. Howard gave me. I was in the kitchen, stirring the sauce for lunch, when the phone rang. I answered without hurry, thinking it was one of the church ladies, or maybe my grandson needing homework help. But on the other end, a familiar, calm voice made my heart beat differently. Good afternoon, Ms. Virginia. This is Dr. Howard. My whole body seemed to pay attention. Hi, doctor. Is something wrong with my test results? I asked, trying to sound neutral, even as warmth flushed my cheeks. No, your health is fine. I just thought I'd call to see how you were doing. Beyond charts and numbers, there was a pause. And to ask if you'd like to have dinner with me sometime. No lab coat. I went silent for a moment. He wasn't calling as my doctor. It was an invitation. A real one. I tried to cover the surprise with a quiet laugh. Doctor, if you keep this up, my heart might need another checkup. He laughed on the other end, then said something that melted me completely. Then let's take care of it, before it starts complaining. I hung up with trembling hands, stood there in the middle of the kitchen, staring at nothing, feeling a flutter in my stomach I didn't even remember was possible. Dinner. With him. No lab coat. I whispered it to myself several times, as if my body needed to get used to the idea before believing it was real. That night, I opened my wardrobe like someone searching for a piece of herself tucked between old fabrics. I picked a navy blue dress I hadn't worn since a church gathering years ago. It still fit me, even if the mirror now reflected a calmer, more seasoned version of who I once was. I put on a soft lipstick, fixed my hair with my fingers, and when I looked again, I saw a woman who still wanted to be seen. On the way to the restaurant, my heart felt like a disoriented orchestra. Every thought beat like a drum. Does he see me as a woman? What if it's just kindness? What if I'm reading too much into it? But along with the fear came something warm, the possibility. I arrived early, as always. I chose a table near the window, and when he walked in, no lab coat, just a pale blue shirt and that serene smile, something inside me settled. He moved with calm steps, like someone who carried time gently in his hands. Sitting at that windowside table, I felt my heart grow still the moment I saw the light in his eyes, that same light that had shaken my composure during our first appointment. But that night, without the lab coat, without protocol, he was simply Howard, and me. I no longer knew if I was the patient, the widow, the grandmother. I just wanted to be Virginia. He greeted me with a soft kiss on the cheek. "You look lovely," he said, with a tenderness that made my hands reach for the napkin, just to have something to hold the emotion. I thanked him shyly, and he continued, "That blue matches your peaceful gaze, and your perfume smells like a good memory." We talked as if the world had slowed down. We spoke about music, our childhoods, our favorite meals. He told me he liked walking barefoot at home, and that he collected postcards from places he'd never been. I laughed and confessed I had a box full of old letters, some of love, some of longing, and he replied with that soulful tone, "Words we keep have a beautiful way of keeping us alive." Between one glass of wine and another, I realized I was laughing with my whole body. It had been so long since I laughed like that, without heaviness, without guilt, without looking back. When he held my hand for the first time, it felt like the most natural thing. His fingers laced with mine respectfully, but with restrained desire. I looked at him, surprised by the warmth his touch awakened in me, and he simply said, "I've wanted to touch you like this since I first saw you, but I waited for you to feel it too." My heart, which had known so many rhythms, was surprised by the tenderness in that gesture. He didn't impose, he invited. After dinner, we walked to a spot with live music. A woman sang boleros on the piano, and the Boulder couples rose to dance. He looked at me and extended his hand. "May I have this dance, Virginia?" For a moment I hesitated. I had danced so many times before, but did I still remember how? I accepted. And there, in his arms, with my feet gliding slowly, I understood. The body remembers love. Even after the years, the losses, the pain, it still knows how to love. That dance was a whisper from time, a quiet promise. When the music ended, he looked at me gently and said with no rush, "We can take it slow, but I want to discover you, one day at a time." After that dinner, something in us realigned, without urgency, without loud promises, but with the silent clarity of two people who already understood the value of time. We began seeing each other more often. Nothing grand, nothing urgent. A walk at sunset, coffee at the gazebo in the park, an unexpected visit on a cloudy Sunday. He would call and say, "I thought about you today. Do you feel like a cup of tea? Or maybe a hug?" And my heart always a bit fast. I'd laugh and say, "I think both." In that gentle rhythm of small gestures, we built something beautiful. I learned that he liked toast with jam in the morning, that he hummed while driving, and that he wrote poems on napkins. "Things no one else reads," he'd say, and I, in turn, began to share my silences with him. Lazy afternoons embroidering on the porch, old photos I keep in a shoebox, and even the fear, yes, the fear, of living something this good, this rare, after so much time. "You make me feel young, Virginia," he told me once, looking at me like time didn't exist between us. I smiled and replied, "And you make me feel alive," because that was the truth. He didn't make me forget the years I had. He made every one of them feel worth it. Of course, not everything was simple. My children were suspicious at first. "Mom, are you sure? He's your doctor. Isn't that strange?" And I understood their concern. But I answered with firm tenderness, "What would be strange is pretending my heart no longer deserves love," the neighbors whispered. Mildred, my porch friend, winked and said, "You're right, Virginia. Better a doctor who listens to your heart with the right hands than the ones who only look at machines." And we laughed, companions in this mature joy that bloomed, between one teacup and another. And then there were our own fears. He'd sometimes look at me with that kind of silence only those who've suffered understand. "Are you afraid?" I asked him once. He nodded, serious, and said, "I am. But I'm more afraid of not living what life still wants to give me." We didn't put pressure on each other, didn't make big promises. We just kept living, discovering each other in every gesture. He helped me carry groceries. I reminded him where he left his glasses. We exchanged looks mid-conversation, hands that searched for one another without warning, long hugs before each goodbye, and every touch, every word, every silence, all said the same. We're here. There's still time. Because love, in maturity, has no hurry, but it knows exactly how to find its way to our hearts. And with Howard, I learned that love can arrive gently, between a stethoscope and an embrace, and settle in like it knows it's finally found home. They said it was just a checkup, just another one of the many we're told to schedule as we age. But now, looking back, I know that day marked the beginning of my last love, and maybe the most beautiful one of all. Time passed with the tenderness only mature love understands. It wasn't a runaway passion that makes you lose the ground beneath your feet. It was something deeper, something that brought back the joy of small anticipations, the sound of the doorbell on Saturdays, the exchange of simple messages during the week, the notes he'd leave tucked inside my favorite book in his neat, gentle handwriting. "Seeing you is always good medicine," he once wrote, and I smiled like a 20-year-old girl. Howard and I created our own rituals. One of them, perhaps the most us of all, is dinner at the same restaurant where it all began, every month, without fail. Sometimes on a Friday, sometimes a Sunday. We schedule it, we dress up, we meet again, even if we've seen each other every day that week. He brings a single flower, I wear a soft dress, and when we sit at that table, it feels like the first night all over again. "Today, no exams, just us," he says, like he did the very first time. And I always answer with the same smile he already knows by heart. We're not a conventional couple. He still sees a few patients. I still spend my afternoons embroidering on the porch. We live in separate houses, but with hearts intertwined. We never felt the need to rush into anything, because we learned that true love doesn't demand haste. It only needs presence. Sometimes, walking hand in hand through the park, he looks at me and says, "We took our time, but we made it." And I answer, "We made it at the right time," because that's what he taught me. Love has no expiration date. It can bloom at 20 or at 70. The heart doesn't understand calendars, only honest beats. My grandchildren are used to Grandma's Howard now, and even joke that he's the only one who can beat me at memory games. My children, once skeptical, now thank him for bringing me back to life. And me? I thank life for not giving up on me. Sometimes I find myself staring at the ceiling before falling asleep, thinking, what if I hadn't answered that call? What if I'd said no to that invitation? But then I smile, because deep down, I know what's meant to be lived always finds a way to reach us. So I leave you with a question. For you who've listened to me all the way here, is there really a right age for love? Or just the right? Because for me, love arrived when I no longer expected anything. And because of that, it brought me everything. If this story reminded you that love can still happen, even when we've stopped waiting, then subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this with someone who might need to believe again. Because sometimes, all a heart needs is a story like this to begin again.